Diamonds to Pebbles. Chapter 3. When the evening arrived, Evelyn found herself with Chef Reuben in the great hall. In the middle were young nobles who gathered in circles, chatting among themselves. At the front of the room were artists, Rosemary, Lycos, and Artis's parents. The soft background music that had been playing died down as the king stood to welcome his guests. It is a pleasure to see so many familiar faces here. I hope this social season will prove fruitful as we all seek companionship and unity. If you require anything, please ask the servants of my household. I wish you all a pleasant experience here in my kingdom. He ordered the music to start again, and as soon as he approached the crowd, women circled him, leaving behind the men they had been speaking with moments before. Lycos also received the ladies' attention when he stepped down, but Evelyn could tell the girls trailing the prince were keeping one eye on Artis. Meanwhile, Rosemary stayed near her parents, though her father was continuously nodding his head in the direction of various noblemen present. Evelyn scanned through the crowd, identifying those she had met before. When she caught sight of the Princess of Una, she had to do a double take. Una's princess had just barely turned 12. Compared to everyone else, she looked petite and incredibly lost. Though if Artis had not invited the young girl, Una's king would have been furious. If Evelyn weren't hiding away in a layer of fur, she would have run over there and talked with the poor girl. They were both high-born mermaids after all. If only, she said out loud. If only what, Allie? Artis's voice asked. Both she and Chef Reuben spun to see the king had crept up on them. They bowed to him, and Evelyn prayed she didn't say anything else out loud, for she couldn't remember how much of it was thought and what wasn't. It's time to work, Artis said while a group of women stood nearby, clearly listening in. His blue eyes glanced at them, and then he moved closer to Evelyn. She swallowed as he spoke to the top of her hood. You know what to do. For once that day, she knew exactly what he meant and where to go. She nodded to Artis and left to gather up a tray of sweets from the kitchen. After that, she entered the crowd of sparkling dresses and listened to what the women had to say. Many of them didn't take the sweets, so Evelyn continued to walk around them, forming a random pattern. For the most part, the topics the ladies shared were not particularly interesting. Just how handsome they thought the king was. How his eyes sparkled in the light, and how they nearly fainted at the sight of his dimple when he smiled at them. Evelyn quickly gathered that none of them were idiotic enough to say anything derogatory while the royal family was within earshot. After some time, Evelyn found the whole endeavor too tedious for her ears. No new gossip had popped up between the women. There were only silly debates on whether Artis or Lycos had the better features. When she overheard a conversation about the two men's height, Evelyn bumped into one of the ladies. The woman's glass slipped out of her hand, and the cup shattered against the tiled floor. Evelyn swiftly got down on her hands and knees to pick up the glass shards. The lady she bumped into started to say something, then her tone wavered. Next thing Evelyn knew, the lady was helping her pick up the pieces of glass. They put them on the tray with the sweets. In a whisper, the lady asked, "Is that you, Evelyn?" Evelyn glanced up at the green-haired woman. Jade smiled at her. From the side, they heard footsteps approach. Evelyn ducked her head back down and continued to pick up the remains of the glass. Jade got to her feet while all sound quieted. "Your Majesty," Jade said as she curtsied, slightly lifting her sparkly green dress, which matched the hue of the king's jacket. Now that Evelyn thought about it, many of the women were wearing shades of green. "I am sorry for my clumsy display," Jade continued before gesturing to the glass. "I backed up into one of your servants, and my drink slipped." "All is well." Noticing the silence in the crowded room, Evelyn slowed her movements as she set the shards on the tray. Her heart thudded loudly as she waited to hear what Artis would say. It was all Evelyn's fault that the glass slipped. "Lady Jade, is it?" I'm glad you arrived safely, he said, not addressing the incident at all despite knowing full well Evelyn was the cause. He had been watching her movements throughout the entire night. As am I, but I am terribly sorry I didn't arrive when instructed. I was held up in the kingdom of Dorian. So you met with the royal family, then? Are they not coming? Jade glued her eyes to Artis, though her instincts desperately wanted to steal a glance at Evelyn, who sat frozen on the wall. Political contentions are on the rise in Dorian, so unfortunately, Prince Halcyon and Princess Evelyn are unable to attend at this time. That is unfortunate. I'm glad to see you could make it nonetheless. I have enjoyed your company in the past, as I am sure I will enjoy it now, he said, then to Evelyn, Allie, stand. Evelyn hurriedly picked up the remaining pieces of glass. While doing so, she cut the tip of her finger. Blood leaked out, but it hurt no more than a paper cut. When she heard Artis sigh impatiently, she squeezed her hand shut to hide the blood while her other hand lifted the tray. She avoided all eye contact, standing before him and awaiting his orders. Artis stared at her closed fist, and he wondered if she really could be of any use to him. You're done for tonight, see yourself out, he finally said, turning away from the trembling girl in front of him. Evelyn walked off, glad for her hood that hid her flushed face in tears. Once she was away from the crowd, she ran to find a place to be truly alone, discarding the tray of sweets and glass on a marble-top table next to a vase of roses. As she ran, she collided with someone yet again. This time, she was the one to falter backward. Her hood fell to her shoulders, revealing her red face. In front of her was Snow White, the king's mother. The woman eyed Evelyn's golden hair thoughtfully, which caused Evelyn's hand to fly up to touch the shortened strands, forgetting the cut. Snow gasped at the sight of blood, and she decided to save her questions for later. She took hold of Evelyn's wrist with a force the girl did not expect. Come with me. Evelyn's feet scurried forward so Snow wasn't dragging her along. When a servant approached them from the other end of the hall, Evelyn quickly yanked her hood back over her head. Snow noted the girl's movement, but kept quiet as she guided them through the castle. When they reached a door just down the hall from where Artis's room resided, Snow White stopped. She opened the door and marched Evelyn inside. While the room was dark, it was easy to tell they stood in Snow's bedchambers. The layout was similar to Artis's, except the couches were free of books. Another difference between the rooms was the flower boxes lining the windows and the vanity desk in between the glass panes. Snow forced Evelyn down onto the seat in front of the desk. Then the former queen rummaged through her drawers, which contained some makeup and jewelry, but were overrun mainly by bandages and remedies. Your Majesty, you don't have to. Snow White hushed her. I've treated people my whole life. Now tell me, what cause does a princess have to hide her face? Evelyn blinked, and when Snow tilted her head, the girl knew she hadn't imagined the queen's words. Snow knew exactly who Evelyn was. Well, it is a long story. But I'm in hiding because of my treacherous hair. It has brought a curse upon me. Snow White dabbed Evelyn's cut with a damp cloth, causing it to sting a little. Then she placed a small bandage over the wound. I see. I experienced a similar situation when I was young. And I was terrified just as you are now, but tell me, can we not offer you protection? Is hiding the best option? My nephew has already treated you unkindly, and my son will expect much from you if you remain as his servant, tasks which I do not believe you have taken on before. I do not know what is best, but my father must not know I am here. It won't be long. I'll manage, somehow. Evelyn sniffled, wanting to cry again, but held it back this time. Snow smiled, the moonlight lighting her face just right as she knelt on the floor. Her hands, though cold, held Evelyn's with a motherly touch. The woman appeared to be some sort of heavenly being, with her white hair shimmering and the serenity in her blue eyes. Then I shall keep your secret, the Queen whispered, offering a reassuring squeeze. Evelyn's tears flowed freely. Two people knew who she was. While the day had been a whirlwind, there was peace in knowing she wasn't alone. Fate had given her allies to trust in this castle. After another tender squeeze, Snow stood, her blue dress shifting. "You may stay here until you're ready to go back out." Evelyn nodded, listening to the sound of Snow's footsteps as she left the room. Then, Evelyn sat in the room by herself and collected her thoughts. Somehow, she needed to speak with Jade. There was so much to discuss. She didn't expect her father's madness to flee from him during her short departure, but she wondered if her escape woke him up a little or drove him further into insanity. Most of all, she wanted to inquire about Halcyon's well-being. Calming her breathing, Evelyn stared out one of the windows and admired the night sky. Snow had been right about serving the king because Evelyn was not made material. She knew a few recipes, but aside from that, she had her servants who cleaned and cooked for her. However, she had observed them work, and she knew she could mimic them and the servants here as best she could. It wouldn't be forever. She would just have to hold out until her brother was on the throne. With one final deep breath, Evelyn stood and faced the double doors. To her surprise, they both swung open, pouring light from the hall into the dim room. Artis stood in the doorway while his shadow was cast onto the ground. Evelyn's boots touched the tip of his shadow, and she stared at him with her puffy eyes. She was no longer crying, but the signs of her weeping were still there. "Come now, Allie, the pain can't be worth your tears," the king commented in a laughing manner. Evelyn closed her eyes, and a part of her wanted to yell at him. The cut was far deeper than he knew, but that was why she kept her mouth shut. The young king had no clue what was going on inside her head. She was certain he, too, would weep if he had to abandon his family after witnessing his father's mental decay. After receiving no response, Artis folded his arms across his chest, and his tone changed to that of a master. "So what did you hear amongst the guests?" "The women spoke kindly of your family while the men were obviously deterred, having to compete with a king for the ladies' attention. To be more specific, the women talked about your smile, build, and ability to dance. The women were also debating who they thought was more handsome, your Majesty King Artis or your cousin Prince Lycos. Their opinions differed, but the majority chose you. Additionally, they went to great lengths to awe over each other's dresses and threw kind words about Princess Rosemary into the mix. I suspect not all the women were genuine in their words, especially when your family was present." The information seemed to be very little to Evelyn, but Artis hemmed thoughtfully, not asking for more. "So, primarily physical features were discussed. I didn't expect to learn much from this first night, but it has its usefulness going forward." In his mind, Artis was satisfied knowing the women were attracted to him after their initial interaction. That was the first step, though, and as Evelyn stated, the women could be lying through their teeth. A circle of women could appear pleasant enough, but Artis had a sister and knew those pretty minds buzzed with insults while their lips spilled out honey. After a moment of thought, Artis declared, "Tomorrow there will be a picnic with a select few. While we are away, you will remain here and help attend to those who were not invited." "I'll do it," Evelyn agreed, wincing when she realized she had made his order sound like a request. "I mean, as you command, Your Majesty." She forced herself into a quick dip, despite her hands and feet twitching to do a dignified curtsy as Jade had done earlier. The perfected movements had been drilled into them when they both attended a ladies' academy in Derwin. Dying to leave the king's sight, Evelyn headed toward the exit, planning to squeeze past him. "Hold on," he said, his voice deepening as his hand rested against the doorframe. She paused and momentarily thought about ducking underneath his arm. Instead, she waited. "There's a tournament coming up, and I'll need your help with my armor." "Are we done now?" Evelyn questioned him, adding too much contempt to her tone. "Yes," he said curtly, matching her attitude. Evelyn briskly darted out into the hall, wondering how she ever thought of him in a romantic light. He didn't know she was a princess, but she had been taught to say please and thank you to those who worked for her. At the very least, he was seriously looking for a wife, though Evelyn thought spying was a sign of mistrust. A part of her understood because assassination attempts were no strangers in the realm of politics. On the other hand, if she had attended as herself, she would have been spied on with her words and actions reported to the king. Sometimes people say stupid things when they are jealous or angry. So, she wasn't sure what he expected to hear from the people he didn't invite to his little picnic. Of course, they would curse the names of those who went or blame the king's bad eyesight for not noticing them. While she sped off, dreading the next day, she saw Prince Lycos coming her way. Her pace increased as she tried to avoid him altogether, but alas, he stepped in her path. Honestly, she could hardly believe that these men were related to the compassionate and sweet Snow White. Prince Lycos seemed to care very little about anyone, while King Artus was an overly cautious mess. Evelyn just wanted to find Jade or even help Chef Reuben in the kitchen. How did he punish you, huh? No food? No water? A beating? Her deep, golden eyes locked on his wolfish hazel. She had been careful to avoid discovery around Artus, but she wouldn't bow down after hearing Lycos' questions. Aside from that, Artus was higher in station regardless of whether Evelyn was a princess or a servant. Lycos was not. It is none of your business. If he wants to tell you, then fine. I, however, shall tell you nothing. Evelyn tried going around him, but he grabbed onto her forcefully. Then he threw her to the ground. She grasped her hood to hold it in place, but then he took hold of it as well, except his grasp yanked at her hair underneath. She let out a scream before kicking his leg. He pulled away, releasing her and spitting at her boots. Trust me when I say this, Allerlyra, I will make your life miserable. If I really wanted to, I could have you executed for attacking me. Evelyn huffed, ready to kick him again. Then she heard King Artus clear his throat. She pivoted on her knees and sank lower to the ground until all he could see of her was her fur coat. Both she and Lycos waited for the king to speak. Lycos, what is this? Prince Lycos walked around Evelyn and said roughly. The animal got feisty and raised her voice. She wouldn't answer my questions. Yes, questions about my private conversation with her. Might I remind you she is my servant, not yours. I suggest you go to bed, cousin. We've got a tournament tomorrow along with a picnic. The prince snorted, then bumped into King Artus's shoulder. Artus clicked his tongue as Prince Lycos strolled down the rest of the corridor like he was the real king. They were always at each other's throats, trying to prove who was better, but Artus wore the crown, so Lycos' efforts failed before he even began. It was at times like these that Artus wished his older sister had demanded the throne. That she cried out against the tradition of passing the throne to the firstborn son, but the only tradition she protested were the lavish social gatherings. For a brief moment, King Artus stared down at Evelyn, who was still kneeling on the floor. He said nothing to her as he walked away. When his footsteps receded, she stood up. In her mind, her impression of Artus became less hostile. This marked the second time he stopped his cousin from causing her further harm. He may not be the hero she imagined, but he was better than nothing. She continued her search for Jade. Evelyn successfully located where other guests were staying, but didn't dare knock on any of the doors. Instead, she peeked inside the ones whose doors were wide open. Just as she was about to give up, she saw Jade waiting for her at the very end of the hall. Jade called to her, but did not use her name. You there, come help unpack my things. Evelyn scurried over and entered the room Jade stood in front of. Once Jade closed the doors behind them, the girls hugged one another tightly. You're here, Jade proclaimed happily. Evelyn hated to break their reunion, but she needed answers. "Jade, has my father given the marriage a second thought? What of my brother?" Jade's expression dulled, the happiness from before draining out of her. She shook her head. "I'm afraid your father has only sent out search parties for you. When he ordered the guards to search for you, he told them you were kidnapped. He knows the truth of it, but he won't admit it to himself. And worst of all, the messenger your brother sent to Baldwin was discovered. Then those brave guards who helped you escape were cast into prison. As far as your people know, as well as Baldwin, they were punished for letting your supposed kidnapping take place. I'm shocked that King Nuno let me leave. Of course, he and his council are well aware that I have little authority. They even implied that they'd blame me for your kidnapping if I spoke out. As for Prince Halcyon, he remains a captive in his room." At this point, Evelyn's heart gave up on ever returning home. She strode a few steps away from Jade. It seemed nothing could be done to bring her father back to his senses. And if she didn't stay hidden, then her father would find her. Most of all, she worried about what Halcyon's fate would be if he acted out again. Would the council advise her father to banish him or even kill him? Should Evelyn travel to Baldwin and proclaim she ran off on her own? But with the search parties out and about, she would surely be discovered before reaching the high kingdom of the ocean. Then a thought clicked in her mind. If Evelyn were to marry Artis, Hamilton would have reason to defend her. Additionally, it would sound ridiculous if her father or his council opposed the union. Her kingdom would jump for joy to be given such a match, and with Artis's aid, she could further support Halcyon's ascent to the throne. "Jade," she said softly, "what do you know about King Artis?" Jade tilted her head thoughtfully. "He's a bit cluttered. However, he is a skilled fighter from what I've seen in the past. Otherwise, I don't know much." "Why do you ask?" "Because he might be the solution I need." Her green dress bouncing, Jade hopped in place excitedly. She took Evelyn's hands and squeezed them. "Oh, right you are. If you marry him, your father couldn't possibly speak against it without drawing attention. All you have to do is sweep that king off his feet." Evelyn laughed briefly, but her gaze drifted to the side as she realized the flaws in her plan. "Jade, I'm acting as his servant and must continue to do so if I don't want to be discovered. All he'll ever see is a strange girl he picked up in the forest, not a princess. Aside from that, lying isn't a great way to start a relationship." With a wave of her hand, Jade brushed the matter aside. She reached up and pulled Evelyn's hood down to reveal the girl's true beauty. Who would care after seeing this pretty face? Evelyn grabbed at her coat, keeping herself from batting her friend's hand away. After taking a deep breath, she shook her head. "I can't reveal myself." "But what if?" Evelyn snapped, "No." After seeing the furrow in Jade's brow, guilt swallowed Evelyn whole. She apologized quickly, before tossing up her hood and leaving the room. Jade called to her, but Evelyn would hear none of it. She knew as soon as she lifted her hood off in front of a large crowd, her father would find her. He'd blame Hamilton for kidnapping her, and her truth would be as worthless as the tiny stones that dotted the earth.